My daughter-in-law accidentally handed me my son's lunchbox, and that simple mistake revealed a plot so dark it nearly stopped my own heart. A retired nurse sitting next to me saw the contents, turned pale as a sheet, and whispered, "Bernie, you need to find your son right now, or he is going to be dead within the hour." I asked her why. She looked me in the eye and said, "That is not seasoning in his food, Bernie. That is poison." What I found when I tracked him down on the side of the highway is something no father should ever have to see. My name is Bernard Freeman, but everyone calls me Bernie. I am 72 years old, and to the world, I am just a retired old man who plays chess at the community center and drives a beat-up Ford truck. My daughter-in-law, Brittany, saw me as a senile nuisance, a relic that takes up space. She thought I spent my life pushing papers at some boring government desk. She never asked what I actually did for 30 years at the Department of Justice. She never knew that I was a lead toxicologist, a man who spent decades analyzing the chemical compounds used by killers to silence their victims without leaving a trace. She saw a frail old man, but she didn't know she was handing the evidence of her crime to the one person on Earth equipped to catch her. It was a Tuesday, the kind of humid morning that makes your joints ache. I was sitting at my usual table at the community center, the chessboard set up between me and Mrs. Eunice. Eunice is a sharp-tongued woman who spent 40 years working the night shift in the emergency room. We were mid-game, and I was winning when the double doors swung open, and Brittany stormed in like a hurricane wrapped in spandex. She was dressed for her yoga class, holding a sleek, expensive bento box in one hand and her phone in the other. She didn't even look at me. She just marched over, her eyes glued to her screen, and shoved the lunchbox into my chest. "Bernie, take this," she snapped, not even bothering to say hello. Dante forgot his lunch on the counter again. I am already late for my hot yoga session, and I cannot drive all the way to his office. "You have nothing to do today, right? Just drop it off for him." Before I could even answer, she grabbed the tote bag sitting next to my feet. It was a bag of canned goods I had brought for the food drive. "Thanks. I will take this for the recycling," she said, clearly not paying attention to what she was holding. She was just grabbing things, frantic and self-absorbed. "Brittany, that is for the—" I started to say, but she was already spinning on her heel. "Just handle it, Bernie. Dante needs to eat healthy. Do not let him buy that greasy street food." Bye, and just like that, she was gone, leaving me holding my son's lunch. I shook my head, feeling that familiar burn of disrespect in my chest. To her, I was just a delivery boy. I looked at the box. It was one of those clear containers packed with organic quinoa, kale, and a small glass jar of green herbal seasoning tucked in the corner. Brittany was obsessed with her image as a health influencer. She controlled everything Dante ate, claiming she was optimizing his biorhythms. I was about to pack up my chess pieces when Eunice reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She wasn't looking at the board anymore. She was staring at the lunchbox in my lap, specifically at that little glass jar of green herbs. "Let me see that," she whispered, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. I handed it to her, confused. "It is just some basil or oregano, Eunice. You know how Brittany is with her special blends." Eunice didn't laugh. She popped the lid of the container and unscrewed the small jar. She brought it to her nose and inhaled deeply. Immediately, she recoiled, her face draining of all color. Her eyes went wide, filled with a terror that instantly set my nerves on edge. "Bernie, listen to me," she hissed, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "This is not basil. This is not oregano. I worked in the ER for 40 years. I know the smell of death when I encounter it." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my scientist brain starting to wake up from its retirement slumber. "It smells like digitalis," she said, the word hanging heavy in the air. "Foxglove. We used to see kids come in who had eaten the flowers in the woods. It causes cardiac arrest. It shuts down the heart, Bernie. If Dante eats this, he won't just get sick, he will die." The world seemed to stop spinning. I snatched the jar back and took a whiff. My olfactory senses, trained over decades of lab work, instantly recognized the underlying note. It was faint, masked by garlic powder and dried mint, but it was there. A bitter, earthy scent that didn't belong in a kitchen. Digitalis. A powerful heart medication in small doses, but a lethal poison in the amount packed into this jar. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a mistake. Brittany hadn't confused a spice jar. She had handed me a loaded gun pointed at my son's chest. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking. I dialed Dante's number. It rang and rang and rang. Then his voicemail picked up. "Hi, you have reached Dante Freeman, CEO of Biogen. Leave a message." "Dante, do not eat lunch," I shouted into the phone, not caring who was staring at me. "Do not touch the food Brittany made. Call me back immediately." I hung up and dialed again, straight to voicemail. Panic started to claw at my throat. Dante usually ate lunch around noon. It was 11:45 a.m. If he was driving to a meeting or stuck in traffic, he might decide to snack early. "Where is he, Bernie?" Eunice asked, grabbing her purse. "We need to find him." I remembered the family tracking app. 2 years ago, Dante had installed it on my phone, saying, "Dad, you are getting older. I just want to make sure I can find you if you get lost." I had been offended at the time, but I kept it. Now I opened the app, praying it would work in reverse. I tapped on Dante's icon. The map loaded, a blue dot appeared. It wasn't at his office downtown. It was stationary on the I-95 overpass, miles from any exit. "He is not at work," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "He is stopped on the highway." "Why would he be stopped on the highway?" Eunice asked. "He isn't moving," I said, standing up so fast my chair clattered to the floor. I grabbed the lunchbox, the evidence, and ran toward the door. Eunice was right behind me. I threw my truck into gear and peeled out of the parking lot. The old Ford engine roared, protesting the speed, but I pushed the pedal to the floor. I drove with the reckless desperation of a father who knows the clock is ticking. I weaved through traffic, honking at cars, running a red light that had just turned. My mind was racing faster than the truck. Digitalis causes confusion, blurred vision, and then irregular heartbeats. If he had tasted it, even just a little bit, while driving, he could have crashed. Or worse, his heart could have just stopped. I merged onto I-95, scanning the shoulder. The traffic was thinning out, and then I saw it. About a mile ahead, Dante's silver sedan. It was pulled over haphazardly, the front right tire grinding into the dirt of the embankment. The hazard lights weren't on. The car was just dead. "Dante!" I screamed, slamming on the brakes and skidding to a halt behind his car. I jumped out before the truck had fully stopped. I ran to the driver's side window. The glass was tinted, but I could see a silhouette slumped over the steering wheel. "Dante, open the door!" I pounded on the glass. No response. I tried the handle. Locked. I smashed my fist against the window again, desperation clawing at me. "Dante, it's Dad! Open up!" Eunice was already at the passenger side, trying that door. "It's locked, Bernie," she yelled. "He's not responding." My toxicology training kicked in. Digitalis. Time was critical. I had to get to him. I ran back to my truck, grabbed my old crowbar from the toolbox, and returned to his car. With a desperate grunt, I wedged the crowbar under the window frame and pried. The glass groaned, then shattered inward, with a sickening crunch. I reached in, unlocked the door, and flung it open. Dante was slumped forward, his head resting on the steering wheel. His face was ashen, lips tinged blue. His breathing was shallow, ragged gasps. His eyes were open, but unfocused, staring blankly ahead. "Dante, son!" I pulled him gently, easing him back against the seat. His skin was cold, clammy. I checked his pulse. Weak, thready, erratic. "He's in cardiac distress, Bernie," Eunice shouted, already on the phone with 911, her years of ER experience making her movements precise and efficient. "They're sending an ambulance. ETA 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes could be an eternity." I looked at the lunchbox, still clutched in my hand. The small jar of green powder. The murder weapon. I needed to act. I remembered a trick I'd seen in old medical journals. A desperate measure for digitalis overdose. Activated charcoal. It could bind to the poison in the stomach, preventing further absorption. But I didn't have charcoal. What I did have was a lifetime of knowing how to improvise. I looked around the car, my eyes scanning for anything. Then I saw it. A half-eaten bag of charcoal briquettes, the kind used for grilling, in the passenger footwell. Dante must have been planning a barbecue. "Eunice, the charcoal," I yelled, pointing. She didn't hesitate. She ripped open the bag, her hands covered in black dust. "It's not activated charcoal, Bernie," she cried. "It's just regular charcoal." "It's better than nothing," I retorted, already crushing a briquette in my hand, wrapping it in a piece of his shirt. I forced open Dante's mouth, tilting his head back, and gently spooned the crushed charcoal into his mouth, urging him to swallow. He gagged, but some went down. I repeated the process, praying it would buy us time. The ambulance arrived, sirens wailing, a blur of flashing lights. Paramedics swarmed the car, their faces grim. They hooked Dante up to monitors, started an IV, and loaded him onto a stretcher. "Digitalis poisoning," I told them, holding up the small jar of green powder. My daughter-in-law gave it to him. Their eyes widened. This wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a crime scene. As they sped away, Eunice put a hand on my arm. "You saved him, Bernie," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I just nodded, the adrenaline draining from me, leaving me weak and trembling. I had saved him, for now, but the fight was far from over. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, police interviews, and the chilling realization of what Brittany had tried to do. Dante was in critical condition, but stable. The charcoal, crude as it was, had bought him enough time for the paramedics to administer the proper antidotes. The police launched an investigation, but Brittany, with her carefully crafted image, denied everything. She claimed I was a senile old man making wild accusations, that the seasoning was just her special blend of organic herbs. She even got a temporary restraining order against me, preventing me from seeing Dante, claiming I was a danger to him. It was a cruel twist, a gut punch that left me reeling. The woman who tried to murder my son was now using the law to keep me away from him. But I wasn't just Bernie the retiree. I was Bernie the toxicologist. I had decades of experience dismantling alibis and exposing hidden truths. I knew how to work in the shadows. I contacted an old colleague, a brilliant but eccentric forensic chemist named Malik, who still owed me a favor from a case years ago. I gave him the lunchbox, the jar, and a sample of Dante's blood. "Find me the proof, Malik," I told him. "The kind of proof that even a high-priced lawyer can't dismiss." While Malik worked, I started my own investigation. I looked into Brittany's finances. It turned out her health influencer empire was a house of cards, built on debt and fake endorsements. She was deeply in the red, and Dante's company, Biogen, was about to go public, making his shares worth a fortune. If he died, she would inherit everything. The motive was clear: greed. One evening, a week after the incident, I was sitting in my living room, the silence heavy with my worries. There was a sudden, violent pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole. It was Brittany, her face contorted with rage. "Open up, old man!" she shrieked, her voice raw and unhinged. "You think you won? You think you can stop me?" I didn't open the door. Instead, I quietly activated the voice recorder on my phone. I wanted every word. "You blocked the sale. Fine. But you forgot who has the keys to the castle. I am his conservator. I decide where he lives. I decide who treats him." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Tomorrow morning, I am signing the discharge papers. I am bringing Dante home. The doctors say he is stable enough for home hospice care. But accidents happen at home, Bernie. Stairs are slippery. Wheelchairs tip over. Necks snap so easily when someone falls the wrong way. My grip tightened on the teacup until I felt the china hairline fracture under my thumb. If you do not sign that waiver and release those shares by noon tomorrow, Dante is going to have a terrible accident. And this time, there won't be any digitalis for you to find. Just a broken body at the bottom of the stairs. And I will make sure the casket is closed, so you don't have to see his face." She spat through the mail slot. "You have 12 hours, old man. Sign the papers or bury your son." The mail slot snapped shut. I heard her walk back to her car. The engine roared alive, and the tires squealed as she peeled away into the night. I sat in the silence for a long time. The tea had gone cold. The threat hung in the room, heavy and suffocating. She wasn't bluffing. She was cornered, broke, and desperate. She was going to kill him tomorrow. The slow poison was over. She was moving to brute force. I picked up the recorder and pressed stop. I had the threat. I had the motive. I had the means. But the police would take hours to process this. They would need a warrant. They would need to interview her. By the time they got through the red tape, Dante would be dead at the bottom of a staircase. I couldn't wait for the law. The law was too slow for the timeline of a murder. I stood up and walked to the basement door. I looked at the calendar. The gala was in 2 days. She wanted to be the star. She wanted to play the grieving wife one last time before she cashed out. She wouldn't kill him before the gala if she thought she could still get the money another way. But she just told me she was done waiting. Unless I gave her a reason to wait. Unless I made her believe that she could have it all. The money, the fame, and the clean getaway if she just kept him alive for 48 more hours. I needed to bait the trap. I needed to make her think she had won again. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marshall, my son's lawyer. "Wake up, Marshall," I said. "Draft the papers. Tell her I am ready to sign. Tell her I surrender, but tell her I will only hand over the stock transfer at the gala, publicly, as a symbolic passing of the torch." "Bernie, are you insane?" Marshall asked, his voice groggy. "No," I said, walking down the stairs to my lab, my eyes fixing on the bottles of chemical reagents lining the shelf. "I am just buying time. She wants a show. I will give her a show. But first, I have to make a little visit to the hospital." I grabbed my kit bag. I wasn't going as a father this time. I was going as a ghost. I traded my dignity for a blue polyester jumpsuit and a mop bucket on wheels. The uniform was 2 sizes too big, smelling of industrial bleach and someone else's sweat. But it was the most effective camouflage in the world. People do not look at the janitor. They look through him. They see the trash bag, the wet floor sign, the gray cart, but they never see the man. I pulled the paper mask over my face, pulled my cap low, and pushed the cart through the service entrance of St. Jude's Medical Center. My ID badge was a forgery Malik had printed an hour ago, laminated and clipped to my chest. It said my name was Earl. I navigated the corridors with the slow, rhythmic shuffle of a man who is paid by the hour. But my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour. Brittany had moved Dante to the VIP wing on the top floor. It sounded luxurious, but I knew what it really was. It was a prison tower. It was isolation. She had hired private security to stand by the elevators and a private nurse to sit in his room. She wanted to control who saw him, who spoke to him, and most importantly, she wanted to control what went into his veins. I reached the elevators. A security guard, a young man more interested in his phone than his job, glanced at my badge. "Service," he grunted, pointing to the freight elevator. I nodded, not speaking, and rolled my cart inside. The doors closed, and for a moment, the silence was heavy. I checked my pocket. I had a vial of saline solution I had prepared in the basement, labeled exactly like the sedative Brittany's nurse was administering. I had a tablet loaded with the videos Malik had pulled from the cloud, and I had a knife. I prayed I wouldn't have to use the knife. The elevator dinged on the 12th floor. The VIP wing was quiet, carpeted in plush beige that muffled the squeak of my cartwheels. I kept my head down, mopping imaginary spots on the pristine floor as I inched closer to room 1204. The door was open a crack. I could hear the rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor. I pushed the door open with the back of my mop. The room was spacious, filled with flowers that smelled like a funeral parlor. Dante lay in the bed, pale and still, an IV drip in his arm. A private nurse, a stern-faced woman in her late 50s, sat by his bedside, reading a magazine. She looked up, annoyed, as I entered. "What do you want, Earl?" she snapped, not even looking at my face. "Just cleaning, ma'am," I mumbled, my voice muffled by the mask. I started mopping near the IV pole, my movements slow and deliberate. As I worked, I subtly swapped the sedative vial with my saline solution. The nurse, engrossed in her magazine, didn't notice a thing. I also slipped a small, almost invisible micro camera onto the IV pole, angled to capture her actions. My next move was riskier. I needed to communicate with Dante, to let him know I was there and what was happening. I waited for the nurse to leave for her break, which she did precisely at 3 p.m., like clockwork. The moment she was gone, I shed my janitor disguise, revealing my regular clothes underneath. I leaned over Dante, whose eyes fluttered open, still hazy from the sedatives. "Son," I whispered, "it's Dad. You're in danger. Brittany is trying to kill you." His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition. I pulled out the tablet and played the recording of Brittany's threat. His face contorted in a mixture of shock and horror as he listened to his wife's venomous words. "She wants to discharge you tomorrow," I explained. "She thinks she's won, but we're going to use her arrogance against her. I need you to play along. Act weak, act confused. Let her think she's in control." He nodded weakly, a tear rolling down his temple. "Good," I said, squeezing his hand. "Malik has the evidence. We're setting a trap at the gala. You just need to hold on for another 48 hours. I quickly put my disguise back on, just as I heard the nurse's footsteps returning. I was back to mopping when she re-entered, none the wiser. The next day, as planned, Brittany discharged Dante. He looked frail, leaning heavily on a cane, his eyes distant. Brittany, playing the grieving wife, fussed over him, her face a mask of concern. I watched from a distance, my heart aching, but knowing this was part of the plan. She took him back to their mansion, the glass fortress she had always coveted. I knew she would be watching him like a hawk, but I also knew she was arrogant enough to believe her surveillance was foolproof. The gala was a glittering affair, a spectacle of wealth and power. Brittany, in a shimmering black gown, moved through the crowd, a picture of elegant sorrow. Dante, looking pale but presentable, was by her side, leaning on her arm, playing his part perfectly. The moment came. On stage, under the blinding lights, Brittany began her speech, a tearful tribute to her ailing husband and his legacy. She spoke of his vision, his impending retirement, and her commitment to carrying on his work. Then, with a flourish, she announced that Bernie, Dante's father, would be transferring his symbolic shares to her, ensuring the company's future. I walked onto the stage, the prepared documents in my hand. The crowd applauded, a few sympathetic murmurs for the poor old man who was finally letting go. Brittany beamed, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. As I reached the podium, I looked her dead in the eye. "Brittany," I said, my voice clear and strong, "before I sign these papers, there's something I need to show everyone." I held up the tablet. "This is a recording, a conversation I had with Brittany just 2 nights ago." The room fell silent. Brittany's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of fear. I pressed play. Brittany's venomous voice filled the opulent ballroom, detailing her plan to kill Dante, the slippery stairs, the broken neck. The gasps from the crowd were audible. Faces turned from Brittany to me, then back to her, their expressions shifting from sympathy to horror. Then, Malik stepped forward, a grim expression on his face. "And this," he announced, holding up a forensic report, "is the chemical analysis of the seasoning found in Mr. Freeman's lunchbox. It is indeed digitalis, a potent cardiac poison. The amount present was lethal." He then projected images onto the large screen behind us. Microscopic views of the poison, charts detailing its effects, and finally, the video from the microcamera in Dante's hospital room, showing Brittany's nurse swapping out his medication with a substance Brittany had provided. The image of the nurse, then Brittany herself, handing over the vial, was undeniable. Brittany's composure shattered. She shrieked, "It's a lie! He's senile! He's making it all up!" But it was too late. The police, who I had arranged to be present in plain clothes, moved in. They cuffed her cries echoing through the stunned ballroom. Dante, with a strength I hadn't seen in weeks, stepped forward, his voice firm. "My father saved my life," he declared, his eyes blazing with a newfound clarity. "Brittany tried to murder me for my inheritance. Every word my father said is true." The trial was swift. With the audio recording, the forensic evidence, and the video, Brittany's defense crumbled. She was convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy. The media frenzy was intense, but through it all, Dante and I found a quiet strength in each other. He recovered fully, both physically and mentally, shedding the manipulative influence Brittany had exerted over him for years. Months later, Dante and I were fishing by a quiet lake, the sun warm on our faces. He looked at me, a profound gratitude in his eyes. "Dad," he said, "I don't know how to thank you. You took so much for me. The insults, the restraining order. Why?" I smiled, ruffling his head, wiping his eyes. "A shield takes the blows," I said. "It gets scratched. It gets dented. It gets beaten until the metal is screaming. That is its job. It takes the hit so the man behind it stays safe. It doesn't complain about the dents. It doesn't ask for an apology from the soldier it protects. It just holds the line." I squeezed his shoulder. "I took the hit, son. I took the insults. I took the restraining order. And I would do it again 1,000 times. Because look at you. You are alive. You are breathing. You are sitting here fishing with me. That means the shield worked. That means I did my job." Dante looked at me, his eyes red but clear. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the clean air. "You saved my life," he said. "We saved each other." I corrected him. "Now, pick up that rod. I think I saw a bass jump near the reeds, and I am not going home until we catch dinner." We stayed until the sun began to dip below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. We didn't catch the big one, but we caught enough. As we packed up the gear, Dante looked lighter. The shadows that had haunted his face for months were gone. He was ready to live again. I dropped him off at his house. It was a new house. He had sold the glass fortress in Oak Creek Estates the week after the trial. He couldn't live in the crime scene. He had bought a smaller, warmer place, closer to the city, with a big kitchen and a guest room he insisted was mine whenever I wanted it. I watched him walk to the front door. He waved before disappearing inside. He was safe. He was strong. My watch was ended. I climbed back into my old Ford truck. The engine roared to life with a familiar rattling cough. It was a beat-up old thing, rusted around the wheel wells, but it ran. It was reliable, just like me. I drove through the city streets, watching the lights flicker on in the twilight. I drove past the fancy restaurants, where Brittany used to spend my son's money. I drove past the courthouse, where she would spend the next 20 years of her life. I pulled into the driveway of my small bungalow. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a security gate or a swimming pool. It was just a house, but it was mine, and it was paid for. I got out and walked around to the back of the truck. I opened the tailgate. Sitting there, nestled between a toolbox and a spare tire, was a wooden crate. I unlatched the lid. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was my mass spectrometer, my microscope, and my collection of reagents. I had cleaned every lens. I had sealed every bottle. I had wiped away the residue of arsenic and digitalis, the tools of my trade, the weapons of my war. I ran my hand over the cold metal of the microscope. I had thought I was done with this life. I had thought I could just be Bernie the retiree, the chess player, the grandfather figure. But the world had reminded me that evil doesn't retire. It just changes its face. It hides in lunchboxes and smiles in wedding photos. I closed the lid and locked the latch. I wasn't going to throw it away. I wasn't going to sell it. I was going to keep it right here. I walked into my house and turned on the radio. A smooth jazz saxophone filled the room, replacing the silence. I sat in my armchair and poured myself a cup of tea. I wasn't lonely. I was vigilant. I smiled, taking a sip. Brittany had called me a senile old man. She had underestimated me, and that was her fatal mistake. I am not just an old man. I am a father. And God help the next person who tries to hurt my family. Because the shield is dented, but it is not broken, and the sword is always within reach. I closed my eyes and listened to the music, letting the peace of the empty house wash over me. I was ready to rest, but I was also ready for the knock on the door. Because if the devil ever came back to my town, he was going to find Bernie Freeman waiting for him, and next time I wouldn't need a lunchbox to catch him. We often assume that family is a sanctuary, but sometimes the greatest danger lies within the walls of our own homes. My son almost paid the ultimate price for blind trust, mistaking a predator for a partner. Through this nightmare, I learned that a father's duty doesn't end when his child becomes a man. We remain the silent sentinels, the shields ready to take the blows. True strength isn't about how loud you shout, but how far you are willing to go to protect the ones you love. Never underestimate the quiet ones, for we are often the only thing standing between our children and the abyss. If you believe in protecting your family at all costs, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served.